Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong. We have a great show for you today, and we're going to talk about the shock, the anger, the fury. Donald Trump has left all of his emotions on his sleeve when it comes to his meltdown over BRICS. In full embrace of war, Trump has escalated on three fronts, targeting what our guest calls the new RIC: Russia, China, and Iran. What are these rising powers doing to draw increasingly desperate ire from the Trump regime? And how is the US NATO war on BRICS changing the world indefinitely? Our first guest is the person to tell us. It is Pepe Escobar, journalist, geopolitical analyst. He has written for outlets like Strategic Culture, Sputnik, The Cradle, and much more. Pepe, good to be with you.
Good to be with you. Cheers, everybody.
Of course. Well, Pepe, I wanted to get to your piece, actually. You wrote a very good article in Strategic Culture recently that summarizes this war on BRICS. You wrote, it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? NATO's wars. Circus ringmaster shtick, I'm guessing you're referencing Donald Trump, only accelerates the BRICS Global South high-speed train. So, Pepe, let's talk about it. Trump's threats have come against BRICS amid a summit that you just attended, held by BRICS in Brazil.
Absolutely.
Talk about why Donald Trump and NATO, both of them together, increasingly sending threats and issuing deep warnings to BRICS. What is Russia, China, and Iran in particular doing? Because these are the three powers you mentioned are the ones under the biggest of the threats to draw this kind of ire, Pepe.
Well, it's a long answer. And I cannot give you the Hollywood 25-word pitch. Okay, let's try something in the middle, right? It's not an accident that Trump started going completely off the rails immediately after the end of the BRICS summit in Rio. In fact, the day after. Well, obviously, he doesn't know what BRICS is. And as extra confirmation, I'm going to quote him directly to all of you, our audience. Start quote. When I heard about this group from BRICS, so it's not BRICS, it's a group from BRICS. 6 countries, basically. So he doesn't even know how many countries are in BRICS or are BRICS partners, etc. I hit them very, very hard. And if they ever really form in a meaningful way, so BRICS is not formed yet, according to Trump. It will end very quickly, I'll tell you. They won't be gone very long. I don't think they'll even do it. Do it means what? De-dollarization is the only thing in his mind. They're virtually afraid to me. End quote. Well, I could rest my case now, but okay, let's get into some juicy details. Obviously, Trump didn't read the 137, 138 plus points BRICS Rio declaration, which was issued in the first day in Rio. It was on it was issued on the second day of the summit, but very, very early, before the end. Summit was on a Sunday or a Monday. This was released on a Monday, which is basically BRICS telling the global South and the world at large, what are they doing? Essentially, working for a different system of international relations, geopolitically and geoeconomic, and away from total domination by Western institutions. This means this is not going to be Bretton Woods 2 or 3.0. This is post-Bretton Woods, essentially. And everyone with a brain in DC and around know what that means. Trump, somebody must have whispered a mantra of 3 or 4 words, and that's the only thing that registers in his mind, because as you know, he only registers sound bites and closed captions, very, very close, not more than 4 words and not more than 5 seconds. So somebody told Trump, this group is going to de-dollarize. And this is the only thing that he's mind retained. So obviously, every time that he mentions BRICS, which he still doesn't know what it is, what it means, how many countries, you name it, nothing.
Isn't Spain in BRICS, Pepe? Anyway, continue.
Exactly. And by the way, Spain is in BRICS, and this is 6 countries basically, to quote him again, right? Okay. It's de-dollarization. So obviously, because, as we all know, once again, and it's worth repeating, Trump doesn't read, period. And when I mean doesn't read, he doesn't read anything. If it's not a soundbite, if it's not a Fox News segment, forget it. He doesn't know anything exists, in fact. Can you imagine Trump trying to read something like this? This is a very, very detailed Shanghai Institute of Strategic Studies report on BRICS, and they started in Kazan all the way to Rio. And they released this report before this, 2 or 3 months before the summit. Trump wouldn't even read the title of something like this. And this report like this explains not only what BRICS are doing, but what they have been doing since the summit in October last year in Kazan, all the way to Rio a few days ago. On top of that, Trump, of course, is absolutely desperate when he hears this mantra, de-dollarization. So what happened immediately after the BRICS in Rio? He unleashes or threatens to unleash 50% tariffs on all Brazilian exports to the United States. Very, very interesting. The US has a trade surplus with Brazil. For the past 15 years, it's around $400 billion. So this is not about US-Brazil trade. It's a completely different thing. This is an attack on Brazil and an attack on Brazil's domestic policy and trade policy as well. That's where the Bolsonaro drama steps in. By the way, while we were talking now, there is a very strong possibility that Bolsonaro may go to jail between today and tomorrow. This is how hard it gets. So when Trump launched this threat, precisely timed immediately after the end of the BRICS summit, which was overall a success. And many of us were not expecting it. The expectations were very, very low. But Brazilians are very, very good at pulling a surprise at the last minute. Very, very good. And this is exactly what they did in Rio. And especially because from the point of view of Lula, like I saw Lula in action at the BRICS Business Forum. I was right in front of him during the BRICS Business Forum day. And many of us, we understand Lula's body language and his acts. Just to give an example to all of you. He has the text of his speech enveloped in a fine red velvet container, let's put it this way. And he was doing back and forth with his aides. He did it at least 4 times. He was changing his speech on the go while he was waiting to get on stage to deliver the opening speech for the BRICS Business Day. Because he was listening to what was going on. He was receiving updates on his phone all the time. He was looking at his phone at the time. And then he delivered a brilliant speech. And you could see that at least 60 or 70% he was improvising. And he's brilliant when he does that. And to complement that, he had Anwar Ibrahim, the prime minister of Malaysia, immediately after him.
Yeah.
And the room was packed with businessmen from everywhere in the global south, mostly Brazilians, but from all over the global south. When Ibrahim started speaking, people were like, for them was the first time that they saw one of the best statesmen in Asia and in the world for that matter. And Ibrahim is a master of concision, sharpness, and excellent delivery. And Anwar Ibrahim explained to the room in a little over 5 minutes what BRICS is all about. So when you put these two speeches together, it was a masterpiece from two very, very good statesmen, and focusing especially on the geoeconomic aspects of BRICS. Nobody talked about de-dollarization. Very, very important. It was about doing business. It was about integrating the BRICS regions into doing more business in their national currencies, of course. And Lula, he made a special mention to all these different BRICS groups that are linked to the main BRIC business group, which is basically businessmen. There is a group, I don't know, many of you in our audience probably don't know that. There is an institution called Women's BRICS groups. These are women-led companies all across the BRICS spectrum with their own projects, with their own sources of finance, or looking for their sources of finance. So Lula made a mention specifically to all of them from every nation part of BRICS. That demonstrates the respect that he has for this organizations. And there is also a body that is, we can call it the BRICS Civics Council, which basically congregates civil society in BRICS members. After this, the start of the day, Lula received personally representatives of these three organizations, the Civics Council, the Women's Council, and the larger BRICS Business Council. He said, well, the work that you're doing is absolutely outstanding. And this is the kind of work that you don't see in headlines anywhere, you know. And later during the day, it was fantastic. This was in a former warehouse in front of Guanabara Bay. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful setting. People were absolutely drooling, you know, drinking excellent Brazilian coffee. And then I could meet many of them. I met, for instance, an extraordinary woman who's the head of the Egyptian chapter of the Women's BRICS Council. And they do grassroots work, but with the BRICS umbrella behind it, you know. Very, very important. And on the BRICS Civics, the BRICS Civic Council, let's put it this way, they had 2 days of meetings, plus another meeting on the other side of the bay. We went to this one, and the result was a letter that was later delivered to, guess what? The leader of Cuba, Diaz-Canel. He was the first leader of a BRICS partner that received this letter. Was a discussion about media freedom around the world and a BRICS media interconnection to escape the domination of Western institutions or big tech. So all these things, of course, you don't see these things in Western media coverage, which was virtually zero. You don't see them in headlines anywhere because this is a lot of work done in the background. But the leaders know that this is working. Anwar Ibrahim knows very well about the work of all these organizations. And it's not an accident that he invited Lula to go to the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia next October. Very, very important, because this is a synergy between the largest South American representative of BRICS and the largest economy in Latin America, for that matter, and Southeast Asia. And Lula can learn a lot about ASEAN integration on the spot. So all these things are immensely important in terms of how this integration is advancing, little by little, but sometimes leaps and bounds, in fact. Very, very important. So when you compare all this activity and auspicious interactions, for instance, we had outstanding conversations with some of the best Chinese academics that were visiting BRICS on the sidelines as well. We had a special debate at one of Rio's universities organized by the Beijing Club, which is a top-of-the-line think tank, which was more or less restarted only 2 years ago in Beijing with some of the best Chinese academics of all top universities, Tsinghua, Renmin, Fudan, you name it, you know. And when you put this all together, this Xi Jinping style peoples to peoples exchanges, this is part of this gigantic study on BRICS pillars. One of the key BRICS pillars is increase these peoples to peoples contacts, not only in the business sphere, but in academia, in media, culturally, etc. So, just this small resume for all of you is to give an idea of how deep and how complex is this BRICS interaction. It's not only 10 heads of state sitting on a table for 2 days in Rio. No, it goes way beyond that. And with the partners around. And the fact that they discuss all that plus the bigger picture of larger integration, geoeconomic and geopolitical. So you can imagine those very mediocre people around Trump not even beginning to understand the extent of this game. And of course, this is all reduced to this mantra of de-dollarization. And to come back to Trump's reaction, why Brazil? Very simple. Because it was identified by people around him as the weak link in BRICS to step up the hybrid war into a hardcore war against the BRICS as a whole. The war against Iran is part of a hot war front. Iran is a full member of BRICS. Very, very important. Brazil is not only a full member, but one of the founders of BRICS. But it's not the hot war front. It's the geoeconomic trade war against Brazil. And obviously with no background, no previous study, and relying on information, basically propaganda, relied to the Trump camp by one of Bolsonaro's sons, Eduardo. And basically we can say that Eduardo forced Trump's hand to slap these actions, this tariffs against Brazil, in the whole process could be considered a national treason. And because it's the Bolsonaro clan as a whole are being seen by the majority of the Brazilian population for the past 2 weeks or so as practicing national treason. So this is very, very serious because he has an overall umbrella in the BRICS sphere, but it's also direct American interference in the foreign policy and domestic policy of a third country, which happens to be one of the BRICS founders and members. So I think this is the short version of an extremely complicated process. For instance, just to give an idea, all of you guys, after the summit, I stayed in Brazil for a few extra days for a few conferences, 2 conferences, one in Rio, one in Sao Paulo, podcasts, etc. And the country was on fire after that. What Trump did was to unify Brazilians of all classes because they saw it as the American bombing of Iran. They saw it as a direct attack on Brazilian sovereignty. And that gave Lula exactly what he didn't have so far, or he was not exploiting it so far. His slogan, and the slogan is sovereignty, once again. And this slogan happens to be what drives Russia, China, and Iran, especially, 3 of the top BRICS. And now is also moving Brazil. So, the blowback on Trump was immediate. And obviously, nobody in his among his advisors has an IQ over room temperature to even start to think about this would be possible, right, Danny?
True. Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to. We can play because Ibrahim's his speech at the BRICS summit was Anwar Ibrahim. Yeah, we can listen to just a bit of it. It is incredible, and it gets to exactly what you just said, Pepe. That de-dollarization is a trigger, and we've talked about on this show how there's this idea by the U.S., NATO, that they can cut the head off the snake, right? Russia, China, now increasingly Iran. That BRICS and multipolarity will just crumble and fall. But this speech should give pause to that. Here's what he said.
It is a historic moment. For those of you who have been following the antecedents of history, will realize the attempt to save the voice of newly emerging economies and countries post-colonialism was by Sukarno of Indonesia, Chow En-lai of China, Jawaharlal Nehru of India, Nkrumah of Africa. It was a bold attempt to ensure that the voice of conscience, those struggling for freedom and justice, is heard. Not much success. It was a bold attempt. Then we have a non-aligned movement proceeding that. We have G77 still not achieving the desired results. Now, I salute you, President Lula, for having the courage to proceed with a clear vision, a clear commitment to voice the concerns, aspirations of the people, particularly of the Global South. But why are we particularly encouraged? Because it is no longer an effort purely of political leadership. Political leaders have a role to initiate this reform. But what is spectacular in BRICS is because of the participation of the business community, the private sector, that would complement this effort and make sure that the voice of reason, the voice for justice, is heard and implemented together with the political leadership and the business community that we see today, women, youth, and the private sector. I salute you all for this.
So, Pepe, he makes a direct connection to the non-aligned movement.
55.
It's incredible.
Where do you hear a global leader speaking about Bandung in 55 openly in a major forum?
And connecting, Pepe. And he said,
with the non-aligned movement and what's happening now. It's brilliant.
And economics, and naming this is the Business Council meeting, the private sector aligned with a movement for justice in the Global South, which generally doesn't jive together, but that's what BRICS countries, that's what these countries are attempting to do, a real kind of reigniting of the true aspirations of the anti-colonial movement. And I think that is what really gets Donald Trump and the rest of the ruling elites, if we call them, very, very, very scared and angry.
The ruling classes in the US, they understand that. Absolutely. And that's why they are scared to death. Because now it's not the non-aligned movement, which was crushed by the US in the 60s and in the early 70s. It's not the G77. Nobody pays attention to the G77. Now you have the number one economic power on the planet, the number one nuclear and hypersonic power on the planet, some of the largest emerging markets on the planet altogether. And it's transcontinental. And it's really a representation of the Global South. If you take the 10 full members of BRICS and the 10 partners and the 30-something who are in the queue waiting to be admitted, like yesterday, that's the real deal, finally. And they have a roadmap. It was very complicated to get to this final declaration in Rio. We learned that the Sherpas worked 24/7 the last few days, including the night before. And it was not because some idiots in the US were saying that Iran was blocking the declaration because the declaration was not strong enough on condemning Israel and the US. No, it was because they wanted to get the precise language that would not be confrontational when read by the Americans, but at the same time affirming unequivocally everything that they are doing geopolitically and geoeconomic. And when you read the declaration, it's very well thought of, it's very well organized, it's very detailed, and the language is not confrontational at all. But it's firm, which is many of us were not expecting it to be that firm. So in the end, it was great because to a large extent, okay, this is written by Sherpas, but it has to be approved by leaders. And the final approval in Rio was Lula's. So this reflects very much Lula's approach to BRICS, which may be, let's say, not seventh gear as Russia and China, but it's already fifth gear, which is pretty good considering the circumstances, So this was a major success. And even with the role of India, they sent a huge delegation to Rio. They had a special a state meeting. Modi had a state meeting with Lula afterwards. Modi was beaming, we're going to start a strategic relationship with Brazil. But this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was what the Chinese and the Russians had done in the background, leading to the summit. And this is something we discussed extensively with our Russian and Chinese friends in Rio. There was the second largest delegation in Rio was Russian. The Chinese were probably the third or fourth, but they sent their best academics. Very, very important. And they had a lot of sideline meetings as well. And one of the most important things, I would say that the crucial moments, very few people paid attention when it happened. There were 2 days of the NDB meeting. The NDB had a separate meeting from the summit, the New Development Bank, the BRICS Bank. It was sort of their annual meeting, right? And it took place in Rio, presided by Dilma Rousseff, former president of Brazil. On the end of the first day, when everybody probably have left the room, and this was replicated on the Business Council, the same thing. The Russian finance minister, Sulianov, he said something which was absolutely essential. He said, from now on, the NDB may, very important, may become the fundamental lender for projects and macro projects across the BRICS sphere. And then the key words, bypassing SWIFT. That's the message. And this is something that I think, well, all of us were waiting to hear something like this, and especially everybody that followed the preparations for Kazan last year in Russia and after from Kazan to Rio, like this Chinese report, right? He said it out loud specifically, and this was replicated the day after by Maxim Orekshin, which is I would say he's the #1 Putin direct economic advisor. There are 3 guys. He's one of those 3, right? And at the end of the Business Council, Orekshin, he was with the Russian delegation. There were very few. We were around as well. So we were a small group of 10, 12 people. And he said exactly what had been said in public for the first time by the Russian finance ministers. So this is this was the Russian contribution, which the Russian way, very discreet, but setting the tone. You see, look, we are basically trying all these models in our BRICS lab, payment systems, forms of payment, digital, non-digitals, CBDC, BRICS, M-Bridge, going into BRICS Bridge, you name it. But the most important thing is trade in our own currencies. And when there's lending coming from the NDB, it has to be in our own currencies as well. This means, once again, bypassing SWIFT. So the ones with the brain in Washington, if they were tuned to it, they understood what Silvanov was saying. And that's the threat. You don't need to talk about de-dollarization when you're not practicing a de-dollarization. You're practicing ways toward de-dollarization. And then yesterday, Ryabkov, deputy foreign minister of Russia, who was the #1 Russian Sherpa for BRICS last year, he said once again, we are not going towards de-dollarization. What we're doing is increasing trade in our mutual currencies. So Ryabkov probably has to, if he's talking to the Americans, he has to repeat that day after day until, start getting into their heads, But this was very, very obvious from the discussions in Rio, from the discussions in the sideline, this, I would say, the top day of the pre-summit, which was the BRICS Business Council meeting, and afterwards, and what they are doing afterwards, and now with this Trump avalanche against Brazil immediately after the summit in Rio. This is on the table, not on the physical table like in Rio, but over the phone. Like they're talking to each other, said, you see what they're doing? Brazil, it's Brazil, anyone can be next. So how are we going to react? Well, the Brazilians they're starting to do the right thing, in fact. They are already in close contact with, especially in Asia and in Africa, and they're finding new markets. They don't need the American market. If Trump actually slaps this 50%, Lula already said, okay, I will slap 50% back. And this is under a reciprocity law, respecting the Brazilian constitution. And we are already looking for new partners. And everybody all around the global south, they are interested. Brazil sells stuff that everybody wants to buy. Steel, iron, planes, plane parts, coffee, soya beans, you name it. Everybody wants to buy that. They don't need to rely on the American market, which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, is less than 2% of Brazil's foreign trade. It's not GDP. 1.8% of Brazil's GDP. That's not too much. So Brazil can find new partners all across the global south. So if Trump goes ahead, it will backfire. But the bigger picture, Danny and all of you, that's very, very serious because it's no holds barred now. It's hot war, hybrid war, underground war, economic war, trade war, tariff war, you name it. Yeah. And this tells all of us the level of desperation in the American ruling classes. Trump is just a lowly messenger of these people.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, Pepe. And many people are surmising, Pepe, that Trump's foreign policy is in large part being driven by more established members of this ruling classes, like Lindsey Graham, for example. And he was recently on Fox News, and he outlined what basically what you wrote about in your recent article on this three-front war on BRICS. Here is Lindsey Graham's diatribe that spells this out.
To recreate the former Soviet Union, the Russian Empire. He wants to take countries that are not his. In the mid-90s, Ukraine gave up 1,700 nuclear weapons with a promise that their sovereignty would be respected by Russia. Putin broke that promise. He's not going to stop until somebody makes him stop. So Trump has been tough on Iran, who is incredibly dangerous, but they're in a weakened state. And Putin, your turn is coming. You know, Donald Trump is the Scotty Scheffler of American politics and foreign diplomacy, and he's about to put a whooping on your ass. What's going to happen here is that Trump is going to impose tariffs on people that buy Russian oil. China, India, and Brazil, those three countries buy about 80% of cheap Russian oil. That's what keeps Putin's war machine going. So President Trump's going to put 100% tariff on all those countries, punishing them for helping Putin.
So, Pepe, this is the outline, essentially, of this war on BRICS. So maybe you can correct the record here, because that is how Lindsey Graham, that's how a lot of the American ruling establishment looks at their war on BRICS. But how would you explain to the audience exactly what this is all about?
Danny, I did this in another podcast. So I'll try to come up with something different for your podcast. First of all, this imbecile is not ruling class. He's paid by the ruling class. It's different. So he mouthed off what the ruling class tells him to do. Number one. Number two, this imbecile thinks that Brazil exports oil to the US. Well, I'll rest my case. It's total imbecility. He has no clue what he's talking about. And number two, Putin's empire, come on, read some history. Read the history of what's happening in Donbass since 2014 or even before. So it's pointless to give time and for imbeciles like that. We're wasting our time. But that's the problem. And once again, I have to repeat that because this idiot is an American senator and he speaks English. Everything that he speaks gets international promotion and he goes in every bloody channel on the planet. If he was from Somalia or from Nigeria, this will never happen. So he's always lying and he's always mouthing off stupidity. So that's it. Don't take him into consideration. First of all, because he's irrelevant.
And in your article, Pepe, you do talk about the RIC and how this war on BRICS that the ruling classes are actually waging has these components to it, these three components against the RIC. Talk about each one if you can. Could you lay out exactly what the landscape actually is? Because as you just noted, imbeciles like Lindsey Graham, they do a lot of obfuscating of the reality.
Well, you're being very diplomatic, Danny. Congratulations. I'm too old for this shit, so I'm not diplomatic anymore. Okay, RIC. Why I have been talking about RIC for months now, in fact. This is the original Primakov triangle, which was conceptualized by the late great Russian foreign minister Yevgeny Primakov in the late 90s, when he qualified Russia, India, and China, RIC, as, let's say, the future of international relations, in fact. Nowadays, we can talk about a revamped Primakov triangle. The RIC would contain Iran and not India for an enormous number of reasons. First of all, because India, they still don't know exactly where they are. And something that I heard from some of the top Chinese academics in Rio, we had deep discussions day after day about BRICS. And some of them were saying, maybe we should start thinking in terms of the other two I's in BRICS. So BRICS, according to our Chinese friends, should take into consideration much more Iran and Indonesia instead of India. So this new Primakov triangle would be a Primakov quartet, in fact, with both Iran and Indonesia, and Russia and China. Many of them were coming back to the same point, that the trust between India and China is broken. And the only possibility is if Russia steps in as mediator inside BRICS, inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and inside multilateral organizations as a whole, to more or less get Xi and Modi on the same table so they can finally patch up. It's going to be very, very difficult. The only ones who can pull that off are the Russians. But considering what happened in Rio, where India, even with some restrictions, in the end, they were following what Russia, China, and Brazil were dictating in terms of the roadmap for BRICS from now on. And very important, they are the chair of BRICS next year. Summit's going to be in India next year. So the big question from now on until, let's say, next or October next year in India is how they are going to manage the fact that they are chair and the huge expectations and everything that was actually decided in terms of speeding up these BRICS, intra-BRICS interconnections for the next few months. So India, they have a lot on their plate and some serious decisions to make. Meanwhile, Iran and Indonesia, they are getting their place at the BRICS table is more and more solidified. The final declaration in Rio totally supported Iran in terms of the attack by Israel and by the US. This was a consensus, and the language was unmistakable. It might have been stronger, but the Brazilians were arguing with the Iranians. it cannot be too strong, because then all red alerts will start popping up in DC. So they found a solution, and the Iranians agreed in the end. And when Arakchi, the Iranian foreign minister, when he intervened at the table, when they were all at the table, the first day of the meeting, Arakchi's condemnation was really, really hardcore, much more hardcore than and everybody understood why, and everybody understood why he was doing it at the table. It's on the record now, very, very important. But the RIC, the new Primakov triangle or quartet with Iran and Indonesia, they are leading BRICS now, from now on. And in terms of diversifying the world economy, in terms of trade in their own currencies, and in terms of very close interconnections, and considering the fact that they all have strategic relationships among themselves, not with Indonesia, but soon Indonesia will be part of it as well. It's very good for BRICS integration. Of course, the 2 or 3 IQs over room temperature in Washington are actually paying attention to that. That adds to their desperation, because every move on the hybrid war, hot war, trade war, tariff war against the BRICS only solidifies the BRICS even more, and solidifies them even to the point of finally this relatively dysfunctional organism, which is the NDB, the New Development Bank, the BRICS Bank. It's probably starting to get its act together. I had long conversations in Rio with Paulo Nogueira Batista, the Brazilian economist, who's one of the co-founders of the NDB. So Paulo knows inside out how the NDB works and doesn't work, especially. And of course, he knows how to fix it. The problem is this has to go through the top BRICS partners, members, sorry, not partners, and also the countries who are partners of the NDB. For the moment, there are only 10. That's not enough. So you cannot have a global development bank with only 10 countries as members. So the NDB has to expand. And as the NDB expand, they have to reform from the inside, meaning reform their statutes, which are linked to the US dollar. So if you have a Global South Development Bank issuing loans for development projects across the Global South, this cannot be tied to the US dollar. It's plainly obvious. But that's there's the rub. You have to start upgrading the bank from the get-go, from the inside, practically from scratch. But at least this process is ongoing already. So every time that I give an example to you, Danny, to all of you, I think you might be wondering, but it gets more and more complicated. Yes, it does. It does. But even as it gets more and more complicated in each node of the BRICS machine, you see that progress is ongoing in every area. And this is something that at least the expectations that we had before the summit in Rio, they were reversed, because we could see progress in every area, and especially these parallel areas: business, women's councils, civics, discussion about media, you name it. What the Chinese call the 5 BRICS pillars, which includes the famous Xi Jinping style peoples to peoples exchanges. And this is something we could see live in Rio, you know, the pulse of the Global South and people exchanging ideas, projects. Okay, let's look for sources of financing here, there, etc. So that's where the role of the NDB tends to grow from now on. And it will depend a lot on President Dilma Rousseff's I would say political capital. She's highly admired by Xi Jinping and by Putin at the same time. So now this has to transfer into actual policies. But it's going to be tough. Very, very tough.
Yeah, and Pepe, I have a question for you. As you were talking, I was thinking about how when we look at Iran, China, and Russia, the real RIC or the new RIC, all three of them are sanctioned countries. Iran with some of the harshest sanctions given their geographic location. Russia with the most sanctions from the U.S. and EU. And then, of course, China has sanctions on it in various sectors by the United States. So how do these three countries, essentially sanctioned in significant ways, how do they lead this charge? How is it happening? Because as we played earlier with Lindsey Graham, despite his lies, his obfuscation, his messengering for the ruling classes, he is speaking to a fear, it seems like, and maybe even an underestimation of what these three countries have been able to accomplish despite all of the adversity and the aggression against them.
The West, they cannot point these countries on a map. Sorry for being so undiplomatic, but it gets on your nerves sometimes. It doesn't matter. And this is something very important among these three. They stop paying attention to the US or whatever vociferation or threats or whatever coming to the US. The Russians are doing what they're doing. They will keep doing what they're doing on Ukraine and on the let's say road to de-dollarization front. China, as I saw when Trump unleashed the tariffs, and I was in Shanghai at the time, and I could sense, I could feel it, and I could see in front of my interlocutors talking to them, this renewed sense of self-confidence. They say, okay, you want war? Okay, we're ready for any war you want to bring it on. And the Brazilians, which now probably going to be, in a matter of a few days, probably they're going to start to be sanctioned again. Tariffs are sanctions. In fact, it's the only policy from DC. They are finding again a sense of national unity, which is something that had disappeared from Brazil, especially because Brazil is so polarized between Lula and what Lula represents, and Bolsonarism, which is still very, very strong. And I had some crash course on how strong Bolsonarism is still very, very powerful in Brazil. So the country is split. But now, with a foreign attack on Brazilian sovereignty, that's great. From the point of view of a country recovering its sovereignty, it's a gift. Trump has given Brazil a gift, in fact. So this is how you, as a BRICS nation on different levels, this is how you coordinate with the others. So soon we're going to have maybe 4 of the top BRICS under different kinds of sanctions and different kinds of hybrid, hot trade, tariff, geoeconomic, geopolitical war. And the others are learning, of course. And the partners are also learning. For instance, the Southeast Asians, which are a powerhouse in themselves, Indonesia as a full member, and Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand as partners, they are learning that sooner or later, the US can turn against them as well, especially when they know that their main trade partner is China for all ASEAN 10, and Russia has enormous soft power with ASEAN, and Russia is making inroads, geoeconomic inroads in ASEAN as well. So sooner or later, ASEAN is going to become a target. That's absolutely inevitable. It's the kind of conversation that I have with my Thai friends when I am in Thailand. Same thing. So this interaction, Brazil, Southeast Asia, soon at the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, will be essential as well. They will be learning from each other. And the role of Indonesia, which Indonesia is like the Brazil of Southeast Asia. The largest economy, significant, strategic, etc. Brazil and Indonesia, they are getting closer and closer as well because they see their similarities in different parts of the world. So the level of integration among all the major BRICS partners is fascinating to watch. It's something that is happening on an everyday basis. And now that they are virtually all of them under attack, directly and indirectly, once again, the high-speed rail will start picking up speed.
Exactly. Pepe, what's so interesting too is how this RIC, Russia, China, Iran, they've been able to overcome so much despite all the pressure, adversity, aggression against them. And then, as you said, there are these emerging countries, Indonesia, the admission into BRICS, a full member, a huge development, as you noted. And then just after, I want your comment on this, just after the BRICS summit, we have another partner country, Vietnam. And Vietnam's a huge cog in the US's hope to isolate China. And here you have now Vietnam and China
joint army drills,
military drills, which is shocking in many ways, given the fact that the last war that either China or Vietnam fought was against each other over 40 years ago. And yet, despite the bad blood that they've had between each other, they've gotten closer and closer. And this kind of speaks to a development I want you to speak to, Pepe, which is, it seems like the more that the United States and its vassals and NATO, they try to place pressure, they try to achieve their objectives of ultimately regime changing the head of BRICS, the more it seems to backfires in ways that are very unexpected.
Absolutely. And what I outline in this column, this latest column that we referred to in the beginning of our conversation, these overlapping NATO wars. NATO is dragging itself and is being dragged itself into these three overlapping wars. And it's already part of at least two of these wars, and soon in the third. The third, by the way, which is the crucial war of the 21st century, is the US war against China. It's now being encompassed by NATO as a NATO war against China as well. And this was basically one of the key decisions of that absolutely ghastly NATO summit. By the way, was more or less almost simultaneous with the BRICS summit. The first decision is the war with Russia will continue like forever. No? And the second decision is we are preparing for a war against China. These are the two major decisions of a NATO summit. So the global South looks at it, they understand immediately the big picture. You don't even need to explain it. So these three overlapping wars. War number one, of course, is the war which used to be the war of the collective West against Russia, and may be metastasizing into just the NATO war against Russia, with the US leading from behind. That's where we are at the moment. Because the Trump 2.0 plan is, okay, you, NATO, all of you Europeans, 30 members, right? Plus US and Canada, so 30 European members of NATO. You want to go to war against Russia? Perfect. You buy every bloody weapon that we make from us. No problem. And then you go to war against Russia. We are not, and we will not be directly involved. Okay, this is theory. It can change tomorrow, as we all know. But basically, NATO will be paying to go to war against Russia, and the US will be profiting from NATO going to war against Russia, and everything will go downhill, as we already know, even before this whole thing gets to the next level. So the disaster is going to be for NATO and for Europe. So that's war number one. War number two, interlinked with war number one, is the American war in West Asia against Iran, which is also the Israeli war against Iran. So it's the war of the Zionist axis against the axis of resistance, and especially Iran. Okay, what does Trump 2.0 want from all that? A huge business scam. Israel at the center of a new business Middle East, or West Asia, which is the correct terminology, at the center of the connectivity corridor, which is bound to disappear, but for the moment it's still more or less moribund, the IMEC, Israel at the center, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates on the sides, and in the extremities, Europe and India. And that's one of the reasons that explains why India is still hedging their bets vis-a-vis BRICS, because some of the Indian elite still believe that IMEC one day will happen. Not with a genocide in Gaza, by the way. Anyway, this is what Trump wants. So Israel is the lord of West Asia, becomes the geoeconomic trade corridor lord of West Asia as well, with connections with Europe and India. And all of that presided by Donald Trump, so he can make extra profits. And of course, with Gaza turned into whatever, Trump Riviera or whatever he can come up with, you know. So this is the plan, essentially. And war number 3, the preparation for the war against China. So NATO not only are preparing for war against China, as they concluded in their summit in The Hague, but they are now at war with BRICS. And this was declared point blank by that stale piece of Gouda, Tutti Frutti All Ruti, passing as Secretary General of NATO, which makes us think that maybe Stoltenberg, that Norwegian piece of Norwegian wood, was not so stupid after all. So Tutti Frutti All Ruti, he declared that Brazil, India, and China, they better pick up the phone and talk to Putin. Otherwise, they're going to be sanctioned, and NATO is going against them. There you go. So this is the short breakdown of these 3 interlocked wars, which are NATO wars in every degree, the 3 of them, different degrees, but in every degree at least, and spells out a mix of total cognitive dissonance, cosmic stupidity, and a suicidal drive. Because anyone in Brussels, and when I say Brussels, is not only NATO headquarters, is the European Union and the European Commission in Brussels. This triad, there are some people who actually have a brain in this triad, but, you know, basically they are just thinking about the retirement day with full pension, and then they can escape to live in Thailand by the beach, you know. But some of these people, they actually think, and they know that this is a no-go. And they know that they don't have the money to support this war. Can you imagine that the European Union is projecting, and NATO, basically both, because the European Union is the, let's say, the civilian arm of NATO, let's put it this way. They are projecting a military budget of 1 trillion euros a year all the way to 2030. How they're going to finance that? They can't. They don't have that money. They're going to have to go to banks once again, and they will never be able to repay it. Even if they steal Russian assets, won't be enough to repay that, you know. So who's going to pay for that in the long run? 450 million European citizens, voters, taxpayers. I would say that less than 1%, as it stands, already see what's coming. When we have 10 or 20% aware of what's coming, expect upside downs all across the EU. We're not there yet. What we have is the NATO deadline, which is we want a war against Russia in 2030. So this implies provocation after provocation. This implies the opening of several new fronts. Some of them already open. The South Caucasus is a new front against Russia already opening, instrumentalizing Azerbaijan, which is also playing a double game. MI6 renewed drive to regiment Salafi jihadi online terrorists all across Central Asia. This is already on. Of course, the Baltic. There is this new Iron Curtain, the 3 Baltic Chihuahuas, Poland and Finland, already on, being built as we speak. So when we put this all together, the Russians look at these movements in the chessboard, and they have to be ready to all of that at the same time. And I forgot one of the most important ones, Crimea. Sooner or later, there will be a major false flag in Crimea. All of you, our audience, you know that. Now we have electronic intelligence surveillance NATO planes over Crimea every day. So they are preparing something. There's no question about that. So the Russians are aware of all these fronts. The Russians have at least 5 fronts now. They have to. I forgot the 6th, Kaliningrad. And we have a stupid British general who's already telegraphing the plan to isolate Kaliningrad. So this is just what we have at the moment. So soon we're going to have 10 different fronts for Russia, all the way to 2030, when the so-called Operation Barbarossa 2.0 should start, according to NATO internal planning, right? So as you can see, it's getting mega hardcore by the minute. The Chinese are looking at all that and say, okay, we're ready, but we're not ready now. We will be ready by 2030. And if anything happens to Russia in 2030, we'll have Russia's back in any shape or form, the Chinese way. And Iran, of course. Iran is looking around, and Iran, the leadership in Iran. And when I say the leadership, this is a conversation that I have been having with my Iranian friends for quite a while. It's Ayatollah Khamenei. It's not that meek president. Not at all. It's Ayatollah Khamenei. And it's the people who are around Ayatollah Khamenei. So who was talking to Vladimir Putin, if I'm not mistaken, 2 or 3 days ago, face-to-face in Moscow? Ali Larijani, which we can consider Khamenei's #1 advisor. So this tells you how serious the real story is. Not to mention those 40 J-10s that are already in Iranian soil. And our Chinese friends are looking forward to having many more being exported to Iran. So Iran knows exactly that we are in a pause, and sooner or later there will be another attack. And this has been confirmed in the past 24 hours by Circus Ringmaster himself.
Right.
You saw that, Danny, right? We destroyed everything, obliterate,
We'll attack again.
We'll obliterate again.
Yeah, do it again. Keep obliterating, right?
We'll keep obliterating. Let's obliterate. Okay. So this is just a short summary to all of you of how hot these hybrid wars are going to get in the near future, not even in the remote, in the near future. So Russia, China, and Iran, in a sense, and the fact that they talk to each other all the time, they are preparing themselves for the worst. And they are preparing themselves for these the evolution or involution, depending on how you want to describe it, of these NATO wars. But the undisputable fact is these NATO wars are going to go off the rails starting now. And it's a non-situation. It's not an if. It's a non-situation. And, this little column that I wrote was just trying to give you a little warning about the highway to hell ahead,
Pepe, maybe we could end on centering the maybe the hottest highway to hell that is currently still raging, and that is, of course, the conflict in Ukraine. Of course, we had Donald Trump. You are very well aware of his 50-day ultimatum, if we were to call it.
In Moscow.
Right. And of course, this came with promises of new Patriots. We see this happening, Patriot systems. We have Germany giving 5. Many of these are not even operational. They are undergoing some kind of routine of inspection, actually. So who knows when they actually will enter the battlefield, let alone eventually get destroyed on the battlefield. But there's another detail I want you to comment on here, not in that we have this 50-day ultimatum. It's going to happen as this meeting that's going to occur between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is, I believe, is going to go to Moscow, or is Putin going to Beijing? I don't know which one it is, but I think Putin is going to go to Beijing
yes,
to celebrate
September 3, Danny.
the anniversary.
The commemoration anniversary of the Second World War, and Putin has been officially invited to go, and it's practically certain that he will go. And it's interesting because September 3 is the day, it's when the Vladivostok Forum starts in the Far East, in the Russian Far East. This is very important. So this means I'm looking at Putin's schedule, because he usually speaks at Vladivostok on the last day or in the plenary session. So he'll be in Beijing on the 3rd. He'll fly. Oh, it's not very far. Vladivostok and Beijing is less than 4 hours. No, 2.5 hours, in fact. So on the 4th, he'll be back in Vladivostok. Makes sense. Makes total sense, and it's neighbors. The whole thing makes sense. So we can count on Putin in Beijing on September 3. No question.
Yeah. Talk about where. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, go ahead, because your question. Sorry.
Yeah. No. I was going to ask Pepe if you could comment on where this conflict is now, given that there are also rumors that Donald Trump, and I don't know if I can believe these rumors at all with any kind of validity, that Donald Trump may go to China around this time. And supposedly Russia, Peskov, has said that they're not ruling out a meeting with Donald Trump during this major event. What's your take on this? And maybe if we can talk about the conflict a bit, where it's at, since it's been a bit since we've spoken.
Well, if that happens, can you imagine that Yalta 2.0 will take place in Beijing? Wow. I think many of us were writing about Yalta 2.0 months ago. Many of us. I think I did at least 2 or 3 columns about that. So can you imagine? Trump will be ceding the prime time to Xi Jinping, in fact. And this is something that Trump would never do willingly. But that's the fact. If you have a Yalta 2.0 and it's in the Chinese capital, it's the big dragon that is hosting. It's the big dragon that is setting the agenda. So for the moment, of course, all rumors. And Peskov, I like the way Peskov has sneaked out of it. It's up in the air. Anything can happen. Well, the war. Okay, I'll get a better handle when I go back to Russia. I usually prefer to talk about the war when I am in Russia. And it would be good to get the Russian Far Eastern perspective in less than 5 weeks from now or so. But at the moment, they are doing what Russians do. They can launch a mega offensive if they want in summer. They can conquer virtually every latitude that they want along the front line in the next few weeks or months. And considering that the BlackRock chancellor in Germany has almost declared war against Russia, and he wants to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, of course, not to the first Germans. But this will be sending a message to the BlackRock chancellor in Germany and to the Anglo-French-German pact, which is basically a new pact to, okay, sooner or later, we're going to start Operation Barbarossa 2.0. What are they calling the Kensington Treaty? So this is where we are at the moment. Of course, the Russians they are always looking at the chessboard in detail. So they are putting all these pieces together. Not to mention studying the complications for the moment, 6 fronts against Russia, and soon maybe 7, 8, 9. So it's tough. So it's a matter of time for the Security Council in Russia now. They can go for I would say, a mega lethal blow in the next few months. And then, in case Circle's ringmaster picks up the phone, Putin can say, okay, that's it. You have our lethal blow. We can stop, or we can continue with extra lethal blows, and then we can sit down and finalize this deal. Or if you don't, we'll keep doing what we're doing, more lethal blows. And obviously, this discussion will be strictly between Washington and Moscow. There is no Europe, because Europe is irrelevant. It's a sideshow. It's a side player. Yeah. And obviously, try to explain that to BlackRock Chancellor. Absolutely impossible. And they keep doubling down. Yeah, and they will keep doubling down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in your article, Pepe, about the 1, 2, 3, what are we fighting for, NATO wars, you write here, when Sergei Shoigu outlined the encirclement, the way that NATO, Europe in big part, but of course the U.S. backing it, 50,000 tanks, 7,000 combat aircraft, 750 warships, 350 military and civilian satellites, an immense offensive budget. But then you noted here, and I think this is what makes it seems like the U.S. and NATO's aggressive stance against Russia more and more relevant, is that there's Mr. Kinjal, Mr. Sarmat, Mr. Zirkon, and Mr. Reznik ready to go, which
yes,
speak to this reality.
Exactly. In all these NATO projections of war or threats by the Germans, by British generals, etc., you never see any mention about Russian retaliation. Never, 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 never. So obviously they know that there will be retaliation, and they know that if they go on with their plans, the retaliation is going to be absolutely lethal. And the Russians, they don't need to advertise what they have. Everyone with a brain knows what they have. But the problem is that day by day, and with this series of provocations that they are stacking up the provocations, and sooner or later they're going to start unleashing some of them. Kaliningrad, from now on, is a mega red alert, no question. Crimea, including the bridge, another major red alert. And of course, long-range missiles inside assets of the Russian Federation, including civilian assets, or against Moscow. That's another major red alert. If you have one attack against Moscow, against one of those towers in Moscow City, for instance, with civilian casualties in Moscow's business center, then maybe we could say that that's it. The straw that breaks the camel's back. We know how Putin thinks. We know how the Security Council, they base their decisions. You know how they are legalistic. You know how they are immensely patient and all that. And NATO, they will keep, trying to the ultimate provocation. And we can be sure that the ultimate provocation will arrive, maybe sooner rather than later. And that's what makes the whole situation so volatile, right?
Yeah, it makes it so volatile, and I think that's what also makes it significant that while the weapons transfers that the U.S. has turned back on under Trump are maybe pitiful in terms of the actual impact now, it does signify this continuation of what many, Pepe, I mean, how many people have spoken to both of us about their hopes that Donald Trump would pull back from this thing, and now we are essentially in Biden era territory. So much in Biden era territory that it's right on that line of where Biden ended, which was threatening and maybe even greenlighting deep attacks into Russia, which will of course lead to this retaliation, which Russia has been immensely patient over, especially in the Trump era. So your thoughts on this, and I have an audience question for you to close.
Well, the Ukraine war is his war now, Danny. Everybody knows that. The Iran war and the war against the axis of resistance is his war now. The war against BRICS is his war now. And he already lost a war. The US Navy was immensely humiliated with no return by the Houthis. Right. So this is Trump's breakdown after 6 months, roughly 6 months in power. There you go.
Yeah, which is stunning in the set when we look at the list of the Trump. It's only been 7 months, 6-7 months, and we have trade war, China fail, war on Ansarallah, the Houthis fail. We have the Ukraine negotiations basically over at this point. We have, as I said before, Biden era now, escalations with Russia, and the Iran situation, which, as you said, it's just a cessation of hostilities. It's very much in play, and Donald Trump himself continues to threaten what would be another act of war, which could very well lead to the big war. And this is what we have. It's incredible how things have devolved, and I think many people got taken by the rhetoric. They really got taken by rhetoric, which is dangerous when you live in the United States.
Just one,
yes, of course,
practically an afterthought, Danny. How to get eaten up and disgorged by the swamp, not only once but twice.
Twice, and the second time, a lot faster. Because,
yeah, a lot faster.
You know, and now I think we're in a moment, Pepe, where the question has to be asked: is Trump just the swamp? And of course, with the Epstein scandal, I think that just poses that question even more in a more direct nature, right? Because it's like, look at how he's reacted to that. That's an expose. But you can comment on this and this, because I think this question actually gets to this. We were talking about where Trump gets his information from Lindsey Graham, when we know that he lies. And so Sparky asked, if Tulsi Gabbard was Trump's golf buddy, wouldn't it be better?
Well, Tulsi Gabbard, she has to come up with little Fox News tidbits or excerpts so she can grab Trump's attention. Tulsi Gabbard is a rational player. Okay, with her own limits, but she's a rational player. Lindsay whatever is a liar. It's much easier, you know. Well, the company you keep. I think I don't need to add anything to that, right?
Yeah. Well, Pepe, the last thing I want you to comment on then, as we close our segment together, is, you know, bringing this all together, bringing the fact we have Tulsi Gabbard. She brought out the Russiagate kind of hammer.
Yes.
But at the same time, we also have that maybe posing as a little bit of a distraction from the Epstein scandal. But what I think is the big story, and what we cover on this channel, is that the Trump administration's desperation appears to be part of this almost unmovable force of the U.S.'s empire, this empire of chaos, as you call it, moving toward a war that it not only cannot win, but might destroy itself. So your final thoughts on this as we close our time together.
I will develop this into a column. I just finished reading a very flawed book about world orders. His main argument is correct. Basically, he says that have been several world orders across history. Egypt, the Roman Empire, Pax Mongolica, of course, the British Empire, the Americans, which lasted, 75, 80 years, not much. And the next one is certainly going to be a world order where the global South has preeminence. Of course, because this book was written by an Indian guy teaching international relations at the American University in Washington. I think I don't need to add anything else to his biases and, of course, the stuff that he could not say. Otherwise, he'll never get published in the US. But the breakdown the historical breakdown that he is involved in when he's talking about ancient Greece, about Rome, about India. China, not so much, because he obviously doesn't understand China. And the West, and the rise of the West, and the West against the rest, which is a completely stupid expression, in fact. It's now, what is now leading is that the rest is not the rest. The rest is the majority, and the rest is dictating what's going to happen from now on. The West has now become the rest. And the West, I say North America and that Western peninsula of Eurasia, Europe. Eurasia is back on the saddle. And if we look at history, at the flow of history, Eurasia was always at the saddle of the flow of history for everywhere except 2.5 centuries. The last 230 to 240 years, let's put it this way. But now that's over. Now history is back to how it was running its course before. The most important civilizations, the greatest contributions to history, to culture, to religion, etc. They all came from all across Eurasia. And from now on, we're going to have a new geopolitical, geoeconomic realignment where Eurasia is going to be at the heart of it, at the center of it. Much to the absolute displeasure of the Anglo-American gang, even before Mackinder, at the height of the British Empire in the late 19th, they said that, this ruling the waves for them, the thalassocratic empire, British style and then American style, will be forever. No. It lasted overall, back to back, including both, a century. What is a century in world history? Nothing. So it's quite refreshing for all of us to re-study for instance, what Greece learned from Egypt, for instance. The fact that for many of Islam's cultural achievements, it would have been impossible for the Renaissance and Enlightenment to exist without these Islamic cultural and scientific achievements. It's good to come back and see that world orders succeed each other, and nothing is static in history, like that absolutely stupid configuration of the end of history that we had only yesterday in historical terms. No, now it's a different ball game, and the different ball game has already started. And that's what's leading these Anglo-American elites to total despair. You cannot argue with the flow of history. You just look at where history is. You don't need to be a Bob Dylan weatherman to see which way the wind of history is blowing. It's very, very simple. We saw that in Kazan last year. We saw this in Rio a few days ago. And, NATO, superimposed NATO wars, it's not going to alter anything. You can send 1 million patriots or TADs or whatever to Ukraine. It's not going to change anything. You can launch 10 million tariffs against China. It's not going to change anything. But, but that's what makes them even more dangerous, Danny, and all of you, our audience. You all know that. We all know that they will be much more dangerous tomorrow compared to today. And we all have to deal with it.
Indeed. Pepe, it's great to have you on the program. I have your Telegram and your X account in the video description, as well as your latest article on strategic culture on NATO's war on BRICS. Everyone check that out as Pepe heads up. But we have a lot more show here to go. Pepe, I'll have to get in touch with you very soon. I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
Thanks, Danny. Take care.
Bye. All right, well, we have more show to come. I just want to note that, unfortunately, Rari Francis could not make it today. She was sick, and so wishing her better health. And now we have our next guest, though. He is a good friend of the show, does incredible work as the editor of Electronic Intifada. It is Ali Abunimah. Ali, good to see you. I think you're muted.
Hi, Danny. It's good to see you again.
Yes, very good. Very good to have you here, Ali. Sorry. Let us get into we're in this post 12-day war environment, but the situation in West Asia is quite dire. We have reports of journalists in Gaza starving, a massive famine in Gaza. We also have reports from Israeli media, Channel 12, talking about the tens of thousands now of Israeli troops that have been injured by the resistance, that have taken casualties by the resistance. And we have increased activity from the Palestinian resistance in recent days and weeks, many ambushes, targeting of armored vehicles. And then, of course, we have the situation that is evolving with Yemen always. They have doubled down on their stance that they are going to continue Red Sea attacks. They've sunk in a few ships. They have continued to fire missiles at Ben Gurion Airport and other sites in and around Israel. So, Ali, maybe you can give a rundown of your assessment of the overall situation as we enter what is both a grim period, but also one rife with conflict. And of course, it all centers around the genocide.
Well, the thing that is on my mind and everyone's mind and should be the central focus is the genocide in Gaza, which is not stopping. It's escalating. Multiple people now are dying every day from deliberately induced famine as a weapon of genocide. Talking to friends and colleagues in Gaza it's just unbearable what people are going through, and one doesn't know what to say to them. We spoke to a colleague yesterday. We recorded an interview for the Electronic Intifada's live stream this coming Thursday, and what she said, I don't want to preempt our interview, but what she said was that what is giving people hope to hang on is when they see and hear people around the world speaking about Gaza, not forgetting about Gaza, demanding an end to this genocide, demanding an end to the complicity of our governments in this. And it's reached the point where adults and healthy people, normally healthy people, are too weak to move. People are not, many or most people are not eating every day. Think about the situation for parents with young children. They don't know what to tell their children. Their children are hungry. You can't reason with a young child who's hungry. Parents are bringing their children to hospitals which can't really do anything for them, and mass murder by famine is underway now. And the only thing that is putting real pressure on Israel to end this genocide is the resistance on the ground. That's the only thing that is thwarting Israel's evil plans to exterminate and or expel the entire population of Gaza. And there is no other pressure. We saw the European Union a week ago decline to impose any sanctions on Israel, decline to end its favorable trade agreement. That was all on the table because the EU had done a review and found that Israel was in breach of the fundamental human rights clauses of its association agreement with Israel, its trade deal. And the EU foreign ministers went into a meeting a week ago where we were told that they were going to come out with a whole host of sanctions on Israel. There were 10 proposals put forward for various sanctions, and they imposed 0 sanctions, 0. And this is in a context where the European Union has imposed 18 separate packages of sanctions on Russia, including just one a few days ago. So what is the pressure? The pressure is coming from 2 sources: the resistance on the ground and the conscience of people around the world. ordinary people, not these psychopathic governments whose only commitment, they have no commitment to healthcare for their people. They have no commitment to housing for their people, to jobs and dignity for their own people. They have no commitment to that. Their only commitment is to genocide, their unshakable commitment to Israel's genocide. And this is now the world we're living in. So I don't feel I'm being particularly articulate, because this is where we are, and it's just unbelievable pain of seeing this suffering. But I feel anger and rage that governments are continuing to aid and abet it.
Yeah, and a big part of this too is the narrative war, Ali. And here is an interview that Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi of Iran gave that spoke a lot about what I think are all parts of this narrative war that keeps this going. The center of it is Gaza, Palestine, and then it goes even deeper, of course, to the bigger designs that both the U.S. and Israel have for the region. Here is how Araghchi handled this narrative war.
You're supplying arms and drones and missiles to Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. The Houthis are firing on U.S. and international ships. Obviously, the actions of Hamas and Hezbollah, no matter what you say their motivation is, are causing death, and efforts like that. And you're supporting all of those groups. Your proxies.
Well, I'm not going to compare, but this what you said is exactly what Americans and Israelis are doing. The United States have supported Israel with all kinds of weapons, sophisticated weapons, to kill people in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Syria, now in Iran, and in Yemen. We believe that those freedom fighters, let me say, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, they are fighting for a just cause, and we have always supported them politically and in other ways, because we think that they are, as I said, fighting for something absolutely legitimate.
Even if that fighting, in their words, is about wiping Israel off the face of the map.
Well, if we have never said that.
They have.
Well, that is up to them. They are fighting for their own homeland, so they may say anything. But this has never been Iran's policy to wipe out Israel from the map.
Do you plan to continue to support Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis?
We continue to support them as long as they are supporting for their cause, for their justified demands.
But those are not justified.
So you get the picture, Ali. Talk about this narrative war and how the resistance has been countering all aspects of the war.
I feel like people are waking up, people all over the world, and people see through the Israeli propaganda. It doesn't work anymore. Even on the right in the United States, people aren't buying the claims that the US needs to go to war against Iran, against Iraq, against Syria, against all this list of countries. People are tired of it. At this point, I feel like Israel has lost the narrative war. I think last time I was on your program, Danny, we spoke about the Pew poll that showed that global opinion all over the world is solidly against Israel. And the historic shift has happened in the US, where a majority of Americans for the first time view Israel negatively. And so in a sense, there is no narrative war. It's been lost by Israel. The problem is not the narrative war. It's that power is entrenched and that people have no say over what the US government does, what European governments do, who continue to arm and fund and support this genocide and to criminalize their own citizens who speak out against the genocide and speak out against the complicity. The proof that Israel and its accomplices in genocide have lost the narrative war is in the repression that we're all facing. particularly now in the UK, for example, where just less than 2 weeks ago, the government of Keir Starmer prescribed Palestine Action, an activist group, as a terrorist organization. And it is now a terrorism offense in the UK to say the words, "I support Palestine Action." That's a crime in the UK. If I said that in the UK, I would be arrested, as dozens of people, hundreds of people at this point, have been arrested. The war criminals walk freely. The war criminals in 10 Downing Street don't fear arrest. And people, ordinary people, grandmothers, students, ordinary people, are being arrested for going out and demonstrating against genocide. What greater proof could there be that Israel and its accomplices have lost the narrative war? The question now is how to implement the will of the people, the demand of people all over the world to end this genocide and end support for the genocidal entity called Israel.
Yeah, very, very astute points, Ali. And this repression, it's spanned and it's global too. We just had a friend of the show, Laith Marouf of Free Palestine TV. He's been detained. You have faced persecution. And of course, we know that our mutual friend Loki is very close to Palestine Action. You mentioned, Palestine Action being banned in the UK, and we can go on and on and on, even just on the journalistic front. The murder of journalists in Gaza also extends into this broader campaign of oppression. So we have Laith Marouf now in Lebanon. He's been detained. This is a big pattern. This is an attempt, it seems, to silence what is, while at the same time Israel has carte blanche and impunity to do what's doing in Gaza and the region. It also speaks to what is a big fear, which is not only the truth getting out about this, but also the truth about the resistance, which will be the final say in all of this. But what's your reaction to all of that?
Well, I just saw a short time before I came on your program, I just saw the statement from Free Palestine TV about the detention of Laith Marouf in Lebanon, and I'm very worried about that. And what I can say, I know only what's in their statement that you just showed. And I strongly support and reiterate their call that all of Laith's rights must be respected. He must be able to contact his family and legal support. And I urge and hope that Lebanese authorities will release him immediately. Journalism is not a crime. And when I experienced detention in Switzerland, supposedly one of the most democratic countries in the world, the hardest thing was not being able to contact my family or to speak to my lawyer. And so I'm thinking of Laith in this circumstance, and I strongly urge and hope that all of his rights will be respected. Journalism is not a crime, and I hope that we will see him out without any delay.
Yeah, this happened 2 days ago, so everybody definitely go to X. I'll put that in the I'll put the statement in the chat right now. Everyone, be sure to go there, go to his X account, the Free Palestine TV X account. There's all the ways you can support, put pressure, because he hasn't been seen in 2 days. He's been on this program before. He's been doing Palestine solidarity work for years, and of course, is an important voice in helping English language speakers understand what's happening in that region. So with that said, Ali, let's talk about this overall situation, because right now we have Israel bombing Yemen. That's been the reports that Israel has sent its air force to bomb what they claim are Houthi sites in the major port site there. And I wanted your reaction to this because it's coming as not only the port of Eilat has closed, or Eilut, or however it's pronounced, but Eilat, yes, and it also comes as Yemen has continued its campaign. Within that 24-hour period of this bombing, Yemen was sending missile fire into Israel toward Ben Gurion Airport, delaying flights. So talk about this, because there's this contrast between how Yemen as one of the poorest countries in the world, has reacted to this. And let's say what happened with the Hague Group just recently. Talk about this contrast and what we could learn from this.
I'll just say regarding Yemen, Israel has bombed Yemen again, and it's been bombing Yemen regularly for months. And this comes after, of course, a decade of US-led bombing by the Gulf, and then the Trump administration's direct war on Yemen in March, April, or thereabouts, which totally failed to move the Ansarullah, the ruling movement in Yemen, from its position that it will continue its military support of people in Gaza until Israel ends the genocide and lifts the blockade. And Ansarullah defeated the United States in that military confrontation. The US was forced to agree to a ceasefire with Ansarullah, which did not include Ansarullah making any promises not to continue its military support for the resistance in Gaza, and it has done so, including with this latest strike towards Ben Gurion Airport, which is, of course, a major site for Israel militarily and strategically. It's not just a civilian airport. It's a site where mercenaries and so-called lone soldiers fly in from all over the world to come and participate in this genocide. So it is part of Israel's military and strategic infrastructure of genocide. And of course, the port of Eilat has not been functioning for a long time now, but has now reached the point of formal closure and bankruptcy just in the last few days. That was reported in the Israeli press. So Yemen, and then of course during the 12-day war that was started by the Israeli aggression on Iran in June, the ports of Haifa and Ashdod, Israel's other two ports, were shut down. So all three of Israel's major ports and its oil refinery were shut down by Iran and Yemen. Iran in its defensive military operations against Israel's aggression, and Yemen in its humanitarian intervention, its right to protect intervention, to enforce the Genocide Convention and try to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. So in both cases, I would say lawful military actions to either in self-defense or to prevent and punish genocide. But if Iran, which is it's not a weak country, it's a militarily significant country, but it is by itself, and it is facing the whole might of the West, was able to do that. And Yemen is able to shut down Eilat completely and to periodically shut down Ben Gurion Airport, and at the very least keep international flights away, because the number of international airlines that have suspended indefinitely flights to Ben Gurion is very high. Most airlines are not flying in and out of Ben Gurion now. If they're able to do that, what excuse is there for the rest of the world and the rest of the Arab governments that continue to trade with Israel, that continue to maintain diplomatic relations, let alone the pious Europeans who keep preaching to us about international law and human rights and so on, and other powers too? I would like to see, frankly, Russia and China take action to enforce the Genocide Convention and to prevent and punish this genocide. They have been clear diplomatically, but I think there needs to be more support for action by the Hague Group, by countries that want to move from rhetoric to concrete action. There's frankly not been enough of that. And if what we're seeing, if this Holocaust doesn't move governments to act, to listen to their people, I really don't know what will, and I don't know what kind of world order we think will emerge that will be better if we cannot see collective action to stop this genocide now. And I get where the balance of power is in the world, and it's changing and it's shifting, but there is an urgency to halt this Holocaust that I think needs to motivate every government in the world to do more and to do it urgently.
Yeah. And eventually, I mean, no matter what considerations may be taking place of why it isn't happening, at least on the multipolar world side, eventually there is going to be no arresting what is the uh, roadmap here, because the Gaza genocide is really a roadmap to a big, broad war, which includes the entire multipolar world. I think that's where the link is. That I agree with you. I hope that that link can be made quicker and faster, because the sooner that this horror ends in Gaza, the better it is for everybody. And I think that that is missing in many respects. Because,
And I mean, you know, to not to talk on that strategic level, we talked about Iran during, you know, in June when the war was happening. Iran as a target is crucial, you know, for Israel and for the West, because Iran, in and of itself, in its own right, is a formidable obstacle to US and Israeli hegemony. Iran is an independent and sovereign country, and that's the thing that the US and Israel cannot tolerate. And the war on Iran was an attempt to destroy Iran as an independent and sovereign country, the way Syria has been destroyed, the way Libya has been destroyed, the way Iraq was destroyed. That was the goal. It was regime change. It had nothing to do. It was regime collapse, actually, because they want to see Iran as just warring fiefdoms like Syria. That's what they want to do to Iran. Of course, I think they'd be happy if they had a pro-Israel regime that controlled all of Iran, but they realize that's probably not realistic. So they would like to see Iran destroyed, reduced to chaos, reduced to infighting, reduced to massacres, to ethnic cleansing. This was the goal of Netanyahu's gambit in June, backed by the United States. And it failed because the Iranian people rallied. They rallied around their government. They showed that the government, even if people disagree with it or have strong criticisms of it or even hate it, because, you know, people around the world often hate their political leaders, that people still supported the legitimacy of the regime and the unity of the country and the sovereignty and the independence of the country, and they rallied around it like never before. So that failed. But Iran is and of course, as we've said, and it needs to be stressed, is that this won't end. The aggression against Iran will continue in all sorts of different ways, overt and covert, and perhaps even another outright military attack at some point. We can't rule that out at all. But what I want to say is, so Iran is a target in its own right, but it's also a target for other reasons because of its strategic location. It is a near neighbor of Russia. They share shores with the Caspian Sea. That is a major trade route, a major access route for Russia to the warm water oceans, as they call them, and that's a trade route that is being developed. And of course, Iran is a significant and important link in China's Belt and Road Initiative. So destroying Iran or destabilizing Iran is also a blow against Russia and China in the minds of the United States and Israel, which serves as a proxy and implementer of US schemes in that regard. And so there is a bigger, I hate the word game here, but that is there. And I would hope and expect that Russia and China understand that. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they don't need me to tell them what that strategic picture looks like. But what it requires is real I guess, realism and no illusions about the willingness of the United States and its proxies and vassals in the region to ever come to terms on good faith. I just think we've shown that the United States is not willing ever to negotiate with anyone in good faith or to keep an agreement. And that applies to Iran too. I mean, I'm not going to tell Iranian leaders what they should or shouldn't be doing, but from where I sit, it just seems utterly futile to engage in any sort of negotiations with the United States, let alone Israel, whether directly or indirectly. And I'm not saying that's the direction they're headed, but there's been discussion about the interview which Dr. Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, gave recently with Tucker Carlson, and there have been people saying that interview looked sort of rather conciliatory and like the door was still open. And I'm not saying people should never should talk, but no one should have illusions that any agreement with the United States, let alone Israel, is going to protect you. The only thing that will protect you is your ability to protect yourself. And that could not have been more clearly demonstrated than with the Israeli aggression against Iran and the ongoing fanatical Western and indeed US commitment to the war against Russia using Ukraine as a battering ram and a proxy. And their designs on China are only postponed, let's say. Their hands are full now. But the moment they think they could turn on China, they absolutely would.
Yeah. And Ali, a lot of this lost narrative war and the failure to crush resistance speaks to what I think, while there's been so many humanitarian and of course human costs, this horrific loss of life, this mass murder, this Holocaust, as you put it. There's also been this, I think, breaking of Israeli invincibility, because as Israel continues down this path, basically with the US's both blessing and really not only complete support, but walking side by side in all of this, it's at war in Syria now, or at least it was, and there's always the threat again. Of course, the threat of war with Iran, bombings in Lebanon, the ongoing siege of Gaza, but the invincibility of all of this, the fact that none of these wars can end with any kind of outcome that speaks to a cessation for Israel to claim victory, I think is big. And here with a report on Channel 12 news was that there are now 18,500 Israeli troops that have just been wounded in Gaza alone. And we know that this is Israeli media, Ali, and it's likely a lot more that they've experienced. So, well, of course, it cannot be comparable to what's happened to the Palestinian people as just outright targeting of civilians. But at the same time, speak to this bursting of Israel's invincibility, because a lot of people believe that this impunity speaks to victory. And I've heard this narrative. I don't necessarily agree with this. I'm curious on your take.
Israel is definitely defeated. It's a dead, genocidal apartheid entity walking. It has no future. I'm convinced of that. It is already defeated, morally, legally, narratively, let's say, if that's a word, and militarily. It's militarily defeated. And what do I mean by that is that you go to war in order to achieve a political objective. Israel cannot achieve political objectives with its wars. The political objective of its aggression against Iran was to topple the Iranian regime or the Iranian system, and to replace it with the son of the Shah or with chaos. Either would have been fine for Israel, and that failed. The goal of Israel's wars on Lebanon was to destroy Hezbollah, to destroy the resistance of the Lebanese people. That failed. Hezbollah is there. And Naim Qassem, the Secretary General, gave a speech just a few days ago in which he was very clear that the resistance is not going anywhere. It is preparing to defend Lebanon if Israel attacks. It has its capabilities. No one should confuse its position that it is letting the Lebanese state take the lead now as any sign that it is not prepared to defend Lebanon with weapons, and that it will certainly not give up its weapons. But it's a sign of Israel's military defeat and failure that the US keeps sending envoys. Now, the latest one is this guy, Tom Barak, who they send to Lebanon to threaten and cajole and demand that the Lebanese government basically start a civil war in order to disarm Hezbollah. That's not going to happen. I mean, if Israel and the United States couldn't disarm Hezbollah, how is the Lebanese government going to do it? That's not going to happen. So another failure, military failure, and therefore political failure for Israel. In Gaza, the goal from day one of the genocide was to destroy Hamas and the resistance. And what we see day after day, week after week, is the resistance fighting with even greater strength. June was the deadliest month for Israeli soldiers in Gaza in more than a year. And July is continuing that trend. Israel is taking heavy casualties in Gaza. And the chief of staff of the Israeli army has said openly, we don't have enough soldiers. And so they have this internal political crisis about drafting the ultra-Orthodox, because the ultra-Orthodox Jews are exempt from military service, and the people who have to go to military service are saying, why are we going and dying and they're not doing anything? And you have all of these units that are not even at full strength. They don't have enough soldiers to fill the units that are in Gaza. So military failure in Gaza as well, and military failure in Yemen, because Israel has bombed Yemen repeatedly with the full backing of the United States, and yet Yemen continues to provide to carry out this right to protect or this responsibility to protect intervention to try to end the genocide. So what's Israel left with? What they usually do, except now on an unprecedented scale, which is massacring and murdering civilians. When Israel cannot achieve its military and political objectives by fighting, what it does, Israel is not doing any fighting. The army doesn't do any fighting in Gaza. What they do is murder civilians. And that's what they're doing. And they're doing them through starvation and through bombing, through massacres. That's not a sign of military prowess or strength. It's a sign of utter failure and bankruptcy. So I believe that Israel is defeated militarily and politically, that this is an entity that has no future, that it will not exist in the future. In our lifetimes, it will go the way of other illegitimate regimes like Nazi Germany and like apartheid South Africa. The question is always, and this is the thing that is most painful, how much damage and destruction will this entity do on the way out? But I can say this with certainty, there will never be a day when this entity lives among the people of the region. It's too late for that, if it was ever possible. This entity, an entity that commits this horrific Holocaust, this massacre, cannot remain. It has no right to remain. Of course, it never had a right to be there, but if it ever did, it has forfeited it. It has forfeited it, and it will be gone. The question is, at what cost to the people of the region?
Yeah, the cost has already been so high, and as we've seen in recent weeks and just recent months, Ali, that the scale and the escalation ladder continues to be surpassed. Under, of course, the president of the United States, who many believed, maybe naively so, that the opposite would be true, even in this region. But Ali, I wanted your last comment on this, which is a big part of what I think is a problem of narrative on our side of the aisle, on the side of those who are, opposed to what's going on in Gaza, opposed to Israeli and U.S. foreign policy. in this region, and of course, expansionism and war in this region. And that is this narrative that Netanyahu is really the driver of all of this, primarily, that it's his legal situation. He needs wars. I don't want to downplay it, because I do think that there is truth to this. But at the same time, in our conversation so far, we have not mentioned Netanyahu's name. We have not said this is Netanyahu's war, this is Netanyahu this. But this is a big belief that it's Netanyahu's crisis himself, in his internal crisis, his crisis of all these legal challenges and cases against him, that is keeping all this going. And I'm curious on how you fit this into the broader assessment of what's been going on.
It certainly has, it probably is an element, but I agree we shouldn't over exaggerate it, because there has been this narrative that has developed on the liberal left or in the Democratic Party that Netanyahu is the problem. I mean, a perfect example of that is Bernie Sanders, who always criticizes Netanyahu. The idea being that, well, Israel is fine. It's just Netanyahu. It's the Netanyahu government. And this is an absolute lie, because Netanyahu is just a manifestation of a genocidal regime. Israel and Zionism have always been genocidal. There would be no Israel without genocide. It couldn't have been established on the ruins of Palestine without being a genocidal, ethnic cleansing ideology. It couldn't have colonized much of occupied East Jerusalem and the West Bank since 1967 if it wasn't an ideology of racial, ethnic, and religious supremacy and genocide. And all of that was before Netanyahu was born. And we don't see any real political opposition in Israel. All of the so-called opposition supported the aggression on Gaza. They still support it. Some say, okay, we'll have a ceasefire to get the Israeli prisoners of war out, but not out of any concern for Palestinians. They all deny it, that it's none of them say it's a genocide. They all defend it as a so-called defensive war. And all of the so-called opposition supported the aggression against Iran. So the idea that you can remove Netanyahu and then somehow Israel will become a peace-loving country is a fantasy. So yes, certainly Netanyahu is a master manipulator, a powerful political figure who is able to manipulate events to his advantage. But he by himself can't do this. The opinion polls consistently show that the vast majority of Israeli Jews fully support this genocide, fully support the dreams, the Israeli dreams, or Donald Trump's dreams of ethnically cleansing Gaza. So there is broad support for this genocide, and we can't delude ourselves about that. And that's why when Palestinians call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions and isolating Israel, it's with the understanding that there is a society there, a highly militarized, radicalized society that is fully on board with this genocide, minus a few dissenters. Yes, there are always dissenters, and that's fantastic that there are, but no one should have the illusion that there is a so-called peace movement in Israel or an anti-genocide movement that has the ability or the strength internally to change this situation. The only way it's going to change is through, one, the resistance on the ground, and two, external pressure, particularly pressure from people all over the world. So that will be my final message to people, is use whatever platform you have, whatever you can, whether it's your social media accounts, whether it's speaking to friends and family, whether it's going out and joining a protest, even just going out by yourself or with a couple of people and holding a sign on the street corner. Be visible, be loud in your opposition to this genocide. We can't allow them to normalize genocide. We have to normalize opposition and outrage to this genocide, and we have to do it every opportunity we have.
Yeah, and the I think what this moment is showing, Israel is a really good case of what happens to, especially a colony that has rapidly become outmoded and outdated in terms of its very existence. We've seen this even with empires, and we know that Israel. Our friend Low Key has said this on this show. Israel has imperial aspirations. It's not that it just wants to sit atop the graveyards that it has created for Palestinian people. It wants to go everywhere. That's why it is occupying Syria. That's why it is trying to wage war with Iran, all with U.S. help. Same with Lebanon, etc. But we are seeing how, in this moment, that ultimate pursuit, when it becomes outmoded and outdated, it becomes more and more desperate, and it does exactly as you said. It will continue to unleash the utmost violence it can to achieve objectives that it has not yet been able to achieve with any, at least with any significant impact other than the brutality. And now, the U.S. Had, in all kinds of colonial situations in the past, have very similar markings. And this is where the U.S. is probably heading as well, if there isn't major changes. But we've seen this in so many times in history, Ali, where there is this kind of consolidation, and we see this inside of Israel, where, it's almost 100% support for a genocidal war in Gaza, 100% support for the displacement of all Palestinian people, war on Lebanon, on Syria, on Iran. There isn't much room of opposition inside of Israel, because if there was, that would be the end of the project itself. Any final thoughts, Ali?
That's right. Israel is a settler colony, and every Israeli benefits from the settler privileges that they have, and that those settler privileges can only be maintained through a system of apartheid, and now through genocide. So all is at stake, and this is why Israel is carrying out genocide. For years, for decades, Israeli leaders have said openly that the biggest threat we face is the demographic threat from the Palestinian birth rate. So they have always viewed Palestinian babies as a mortal enemy of Israel, an existential threat to Israel. And so the logic that leads to is, if your enemy is Palestinian babies, you have to exterminate the babies. And this is what they're doing. They're doing it openly. And they've said why. They want to reduce the Palestinian population, whether through ethnic cleansing or through outright extermination. And from their perspective, if they're getting away with it, why shouldn't they? They don't have moral restraints about that. And so far, they are getting away with it. Yes, Israel is taking a hit. It is a grim place for its people, but it's not as grim as they're making it for everyone else in the region. And so, from their perspective, if the world is letting them do it, why shouldn't they? They don't care. They don't view Palestinians as human. And the thing we have to remember is that Israel is a tiny entity. And all of this mass murder can only happen with the support primarily of the United States, but also the rest of the West. And so it's up to us, wherever we are in the United States, in Europe, in Canada, to make life hell for those politicians. I mean that politically. I'm not calling on anyone to go out and I don't want anyone to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying go out and carry out, physical. Yes, certainly protest and civil disobedience in the tradition that it's carried out. But make life hell politically for politicians who continue to justify these crimes, who continue to sit on the fence to sit on the fence of the death camp. You can't sit on the fence of the death camp, and not to allow any space, any political space for that. Protest. Use your voice everywhere you can, because Gaza is the first and primary site of this horrific Western genocidal politics, but it won't be the last. You know, Gaza is the test of how they see human life. It's also not the first one. I mean, they were willing to murder millions of people in Southeast Asia, no problem, to maintain first French and then US hegemony. They were willing to murder hundreds of thousands of people in genocides in Central America in the 1980s, just to stop people in Central America, particularly indigenous people, from having sovereignty and self-determination. The US had no compunction about helping those countries murder hundreds of thousands of people, and Israel helped too, by the way, particularly in the genocide in Guatemala. We had a really powerful article about that recently on the electronic intifada. So for them, human life has no value, and we're seeing that in Gaza. I think the difference in Gaza is that it's all visible in real time now. We see the victims filming their own deaths in a way that we've never seen before, and they don't care. The people in power don't care. I don't have the solution to how we get out of this. Perhaps the shifting geopolitics will eventually make these things not happen. We're not there yet, sadly. And to the extent that we can, as individuals, as communities, as citizens, continue to protest and use the space we still have. We know they're trying to close the space. We know there's repression, but we still have space, and we have to use it to the maximum to try to define a world that's worth living in.
Yeah, very well said, and really all eyes, all cameras, all everyone who's paying attention needs to be centering all of that attention on the U.S. and the collective West as a whole. It is here. It is in this arena of what we are talking about, of this evolving world order, where that change is going to have to come, because we talk about on the show all the time, Ali, the shifts in the world order. We can depend on it. It's not easy, and it's not monolithic. It is not linear. But we can depend on the global South, as we have been historically, to move in the long arc of what is justice. It's the fact that there is this, contradiction. The other side of it is empire, and the West is not going to let go of that without major consequences, which you are seeing borne out. And the genocide in Gaza is maybe the biggest one that has caught the most global attention, but it is an extension of a much bigger process, which indeed centers here, and that's our responsibility. Ali, it's been great to be with you. I will leave with you. I want to point everyone to the video description where they can find Electronic Intifada and support your work. Anything else you want to plug or say? I'll pull up some super chats to thank them. Thank you all for that.
Just to thank you, Danny, for the work you're doing. You educate so many people, and I'm grateful to all your viewers. I know that we share many viewers with you at the Electronic Intifada live stream. But for those who aren't familiar with us, we do a weekly program on YouTube, on Rumble, on Twitter, Thursdays at noon US Eastern Time. We go live, of course. It's all available afterwards on our YouTube channel. And of course, we have a lot of reporting, particularly from our colleagues in Gaza at electronicintifada.net.
Yes, and I'll put that also in the video description, the Electronic Intifada YouTube channel. I've been happy to see the Electronic Intifada channel grow. I know that it wasn't You all have been in an online publication for so long, and it's great to see you all have come on here, because there really isn't enough coverage of this region, and of course of Palestine. So everyone, be sure to support that. Hit the like button before you go, because that will also push this stream further and wider in the algorithm, and that helps boost it in the algorithm. In the video description, of course, all the places you can support the guests for today, as well as this channel, Patreon, Substack, and much more. I'll be back tomorrow with Richard Wolff and Sean Fu. We're going to be talking about de-dollarization and the geoeconomic side, geopolitical economy side of all of this. With that said, everybody, take care, and I will notify you all about that soon. Bye-bye.